I read an article from the New York Times earlier this week with the headline reading, "Should the autism spectrum be split apart?" The gist of the article is explaining profound autism and high-functioning autism, and whether they should be categorized under the same name. And I thought, Finally, someone is asking the question that so many parents have been screaming for years. This article caught my attention immediately because honestly, it's a conversation that I have almost every single day. And it's brought division between parents of highly affected children and autistic advocates. I work with individuals who the article calls profoundly autistic, those who are non-speaking, highly dysregulated, and needing 24/7 care. When I speak with their parents, they explain that they are frustrated, heartbroken, and honestly just exhausted. They feel abandoned by a system that offers them almost no options, few therapies that actually help, and even fewer people truly understand what they're living through. These are families who live in a constant state of anxiety, stress, and at times hopelessness. I see the exhaustion, I see the tears, and I see some depression. The biggest question and fear for so many of these parents is, what is going to happen when I'm gone? Who is going to take care of my child? Hi, I'm Dr. Dana Johnson, an occupational therapist with a PhD in child mental health and development and with advanced training in functional and nutritional medicine. I spent nearly 2 decades working directly with children and adults who have complex autism who would be considered profoundly affected. I've learned so much from these families, and I want to share what I have learned with all of you. So as an ally to these families, today I want to talk more about how did we get here? How did we get to this division? And we'll talk about the evolution of autism and the changes that we've seen over the years that's contributed to this division. I'm going to talk about why the current autism label is negatively affecting both families of children with complex autism and those who are speaking autistics. And I'll talk about what we can do about this division within the autism community. And be sure to stay with me until the end, because I'm going to tell you where I completely got it wrong, even after nearly 20 years of working in this field, and I promise it will change the way you see autism altogether. For those who are not personally involved in the world of autism, this entire topic can also be confusing. I have friends who are incredibly smart, well-educated people who have asked me, how can someone who is nonverbal, unable to use the restroom independently, and needs constant care have the same diagnosis as Elon Musk or Bill Gates? And honestly, that's a fair question. It doesn't make sense. And when something doesn't make sense to logical people, that's usually a sign that there is something wrong with the system. So there appears to be 2 groups. In one group, you have children with very complex autism. These are children and adults who cannot take care of themselves, who may be non-speaking, and who will probably require care for the rest of their lives. The parents of these children often feel dismissed and gaslit because there's a comparison between their child and those speaking autistics who can also live independently. In the other group, you have autistic adults, many of them verbal, educated, and can live independently, who are deeply offended when they hear language like, autism is brutal, or we need a cure. They see autism as part of their identity, not a disease or disorder. So how did we end up with this division? Well, let's go back to where it started. This entire divide is rooted in how the definition of autism has changed over time. In 1968, the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, listed autism very vaguely, with very little clarity or consistency. It was actually associated with the childhood onset diagnosis of schizophrenia. In 1980, the DSM-3 defined autism around 3 main areas: social interaction, communication, and repetitive behaviors. In 1994, the DSM-4 added Asperger's and PDD-NOS, which is pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. And this created 3 subtypes within the spectrum. Now, it was in 2013, the DSM-5 merged everything into one umbrella: autism spectrum disorder. No more separate categories, no more requirements for language delay, one massive catch-all label. Now, that 2013 shift, which was merging everyone into one spectrum, is what, in my opinion, created the confusion and divide that we see today. Parents of children with complex autism felt completely abandoned. The recognition of their children's complex medical and motor-based challenges became diluted due to the merging of these 3 distinct subtypes. Meanwhile, speaking autistics gained a voice, and rightly so. In efforts to spread awareness, activism ensued with slogans such as "Nothing about us without us." They built a grassroots campaign around educating the world about autism and autism acceptance. Now, I believe that they were thinking about who they are, but not necessarily considering the complex autistics who don't have a voice or their parents. Now, I realize that their intention wasn't to minimize these individuals, but that's unfortunately what happened. Now, both groups were suddenly living under one label that tried to include everyone from Elon Musk to a nonverbal 8-year-old with self-injurious behaviors. And that's when the divide completely exploded. For families of children with complex autism, this broad label has been devastating. Why? Because they're not getting the support that they need. Their children are misunderstood. The focus is now on the child's behaviors rather than a motor planning disability. Therapies often ignore the underlying medical issues and the motor planning challenges, and these therapies are often completely inappropriate and ineffective. Now, I go into this topic in my video, Autism Isn't What You Think, so be sure to check that video out. For many of the families that I work with, their daily life is flat out survival mode. No respite, no support, and for some, a constant fear of their child's intense, uncontrolled outbursts. Now, when these families hear the advocates say, autism is a gift or autism is a superpower, it literally feels like a slap in the face. Because for them, this is a challenge that they have on a daily basis. It's real, it's very hard, and something needs to change. Now, on the other side, we have individuals who are very verbal, often highly intelligent, and deeply involved in advocacy. However, they grew up being told that they were different and often felt like something was wrong with them. They were forced to mask, to fit in, to hide their natural selves. So for them, autism acceptance and neurodiversity are lifelines, a way to reclaim their dignity and self-worth. They see autism not as something to be cured, but something to be understood and accepted. But they also, too, have challenges: sensory overload, anxiety, and discrimination. They experience, though, a different kind of hardship. And to them, the cure talk feels like an attack on who they are. This is why they're so passionate and sometimes defensive when they hear parents describe autism as suffering. Now, both groups have legitimate views, and that's why parents feel abandoned while advocates feel unheard. Recently, some researchers have tried to address this issue. In 2021, the Lancet Commission proposed the term profound autism. Now, this wasn't meant to stigmatize, although not every autistic person loved that. It was meant to acknowledge reality, that some autistic individuals need lifelong care and their needs are very different. Some families and advocates are trying to actually find middle ground. They agree that dignity and competence should be presumed for everyone, but they also recognize that profound autism often requires a different framework, not just better inclusion. So it's complicated because for some, autism can make life challenging, and for others, it can make life a daily crisis. But here's the thing: two things can actually be true at the same time, but that doesn't mean it should be defined by the same word. So here's where I had to admit I was wrong. For years, I looked at my complex clients and assumed that their pediatrician or therapist assessment scores were accurate, that they were in fact low IQ or intellectually disabled, but I was completely wrong. I've now worked with hundreds of individuals who are non-speaking or minimally verbal, who are communicating through spelling and typing, and they are brilliant. They're thoughtful, aware, articulate, and they have told me things like, I am trapped in my body that doesn't listen to my brain. I may do things that I don't intend to do. They describe their difficulties with motor planning, impulsive body movements, and medical complications that are causing them pain. They don't reject help. They want help. Many have said that they wish for a cure, but not because they hate who they are, but because living in their body is overwhelmingly frustrating. People with complex autism are teaching us that autism isn't about behavior. It's about a brain-body disconnect or not being able to do something that they want to do. So yes, I got it wrong. I was trained that my non-speaking clients were intellectually disabled and I needed to dumb down my vocabulary. And the worst thing, I spoke about them in front of them rather than directly to them. I was not presuming competence. And for that, I am so sorry. So back to our original question, should the autism spectrum be split apart? In my opinion, until we have two separate words describing the two separate groups, we will continue to have confusion, resentment, gaslighting, and frustration, and we will continue to fail both groups. So the answer is yes, we need two separate groups with separate definitions, because one word cannot define two very different groups of individuals. This is not to divide people, but to bring validation to parents who have been advocating for their child and for their child's support. This is for clarity so that everyone can understand autism and the needs of each individual so that they can get the individual support that they need. Because when we lump everyone together under one umbrella, we erase the needs of both groups. It's time that we agree that autism cannot be defined as one thing. It's many things with many causes, many outcomes, and many realities. We need better vocabulary for better understanding. If this video resonated with you, if you're a parent, a professional, or even an autistic individual who's been trying to make sense of this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the autism spectrum should be split apart? And how does this divide affect your family or your work? Please leave a comment below and let's have a conversation together. If you found this video valuable, please hit subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear a perspective that's grounded in compassion and reality. Thank you, and I will see you on the next video.